everyone. Welcome to the August meeting of Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm Rachel Carestas, CCL's Executive Director. Um, Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to have a really great conversation. Please go ahead and introduce yourselves in the Q&A so we can all see who's here and welcome each other. Let us know where you're joining from, how many folks are there with you, and also use the link in the chat to log your attendance today so that we can officially know that you're here. It really helps us track our progress and measure our impact when you log your attendance. So please take a second to do just that. But just make sure you're logged into CCL Community and then click on that link. So thank you all for being with us on the call this month. And without any further ado, let's get started. It is August. Surprise, surprise. It's really hot here in Florida. It probably is where you all are too. But here at CCL, it's Electrification Month. And we want everyone to know that there are cutting edge, clean energy options available right now. And that very importantly, there are ways to save money on them too. And that is thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act that Congress passed 2 years ago. And of course, that we all lobbied very hard to get enacted. So on today's call, we're going to dig in on that a little bit more. We're going to hear from the electrification experts over at Rewiring America, and we're also going to review the new materials that we have available to support all of your outreach conversations. But before we get into all of that, let's first take a few minutes to celebrate our recent wins and to talk about some big legislative movement that has happened since our last meeting. So please go ahead and share any of your individual CCL wins or chapter successes in the Q&A so that they're visible to everyone. And I'm going to ask Flannery to read through some of those successes and stories out loud in a few minutes after I share a few of our national highlights. So let's talk about the national stuff we're celebrating. So thank you again to everyone that was able to come to DC in June. That lobby day really, really has had a big impact on our work over the course of this summer. If you were able to attend last month's call, Ben gave us a really great overview of all of this during the July meeting. But things have continued to advance since then, which is really amazing. And thanks to all of your efforts. So since we lobbied on Capitol Hill in June, there have been two, not one, but two bipartisan climate bills introduced, and both of them were related to our two primary asks on the Hill. So the first of those is in the House, and that was the Prove It Act. That was one of our primary asks, and that directs the Department of Energy to measure the carbon intensity of certain goods in the United States and abroad. And the second is the Energy Permitting Reform Act, and it was a primary ask of ours. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that bill in a moment. We have had 27 new co-sponsors come on board on all of the bills we've lobbied on, and those have been both Democratic and Republican co-sponsors coming on board. Specifically, that's been 13 more co-sponsors on the House Prove It Act since it was introduced, which is really huge. We've had 7 co-sponsors on the House Increased TSP Access Act since our lobby day. This was a secondary ask of ours that deals with helping agricultural producers, farmers, to fully utilize current conservation and climate programs. We've also had 7 new co-sponsors on the House Seedlings for Sustainable Habitat Restoration Act since our lobby day. Again, that was another secondary ask of ours, and that bill would support the development of seedling nurseries to improve and expand reforestation efforts. So lots and lots of momentum on all the things that you all were lobbying on in June. And what's really interesting and impactful to me as someone who's new to the organization is all of these bipartisan wins really show that all the bridge building work we've all been doing in the climate space is really working and having an impact. I mean, we're moving the needle in every area where we put our constituent lobbying pressure, and members of both major parties are responding. And sometimes that working in this very intentional bipartisan way puts us in creative or unusual situations or coalitions, right? They say politics makes for unusual bedfellows, and that is definitely true sometimes when you're working in a bipartisan space. And I know for a lot of folks that can be really uncomfortable if you find yourself maybe on the, with a different viewpoint than another organization or another person or another advocate that you usually or otherwise would agree with. And we see some of that happening a lot in response to the permitting reform bill. And that's a natural thing. It's going to happen. It's not something that has surprised us, but it is something that can make folks feel uncomfortable. And we want you all to know that we hear you and we see that, and we're very much committed to making sure that folks feel comfortable about the work that we're doing and that you have the resources and the language to have those conversations with folks. But, building bridges and advancing policy that will reduce emissions is what we're here to do. And that's what we're doing. So, with all of that, let's dig in a little more on the Energy Permitting Reform Act. And I'm going to call it the permitting bill for short, just because these bills all have really long names. And I think you all know what I'm talking about if I say the permitting bill. So, we were really excited to see this bill introduced by Senators Manchin and Barrasso. It's very much a bipartisan permitting bill, and it represents a huge leap forward in this policy area. I can tell you personally, I've been working on permitting reform for probably 15 years, and this is like the biggest leap forward. And that it's bipartisan is just a massive accomplishment. And I think, you know, this organization having been so integral to that is really something we should celebrate. And part of the reason, of course, why we support this bill is that we need permitting reform, honestly, to meet our climate goals. Without it, we just can't build and connect the clean energy as fast as we need to do. This bill would speed up clean energy deployment and make it easier and faster to reduce carbon pollution. There are well-respected energy modelers out there working on the numbers right now. And, as a scientist, like that's everything to me, right? Like what does the science say? What does the evidence say? What do the models say? But I also know that good science and good analysis takes a little bit of time. So to thoroughly analyze the impact of this bill, those folks are taking the time, they're being careful. We feel like we're going to be confident in those careful analyses, and we feel based on sort of some of the preliminary sneak peeks at that those models and that analysis is going to show that the permitting reforms will reduce carbon pollution. Even though there are some fossil fuel provisions included in the bill, there's so much in there for clean energy, and we think there's no question this bill will reduce emissions overall. And the other really important point here is that this bill includes a lot of what we asked for during our lobbying day and the outreach over the last few months, plus some helpful provisions even beyond what we asked for, which is always a nice bonus to get things we didn't ask for. But there will be faster permitting and building for transmission lines. This was a huge element of the Big Wires Act, which many of you may remember from lobbying efforts last year. There are also reasonable timelines for judicial review so that permits for clean energy projects don't get hung up in court for years and years on end. And there are reforms to support specific clean energy technologies like geothermal, hydropower. And again, really, I think another really important point on this is that this bill did not take us by surprise. Our DC team, Ben and Jen in particular, were, well aware of the negotiations here. They were regularly meeting with a number of offices on the Hill to share our viewpoints, to advocate for CCL's positions and our desired outcomes. And I think that's one of the values that we provide at CCL. I hope you guys agree, but that we have the staff on the ground who's working all the time to reinforce the message that you, the volunteers, are raising in your lobby meetings and the messages that you're delivering to your members of Congress. So we're hitting folks from both sides. The bill was introduced on July 22nd, which was my birthday. So for my birthday this year, I got permitting reform. One of the better gifts I think I've ever gotten, to be fair. But Senators Manchin and Barrasso, they moved really quickly after the bill was introduced to bring it to the committee, the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. They plan to mark it up and vote on it the week that it was introduced. So, of course, we put out an action alert to CCL volunteers in states with senators on that committee. And those volunteers generated more than 500 phone calls to those senators before the vote. I mean, that's incredible. The bill passed out of committee on July 31st on a bipartisan vote of 15-4. Just stop and think about that for just a second. A 15-4 bipartisan vote. I know you're all keen observers of Congress, and in this current political climate, that's extraordinary. And I think it's fair for us to take some of the credit for that, maybe a little bit more than some. But this was more bipartisan support than anyone expected. And so I think we can say we made an impact there. I also want to give a shout out to what the CCL staff have been doing to make sure that everyone is up to speed, because this has moved super fast, as you guys all know. So, huge thank you to Ben and to Dana, who held a live Q&A session with Elizabeth. Thanks to Brett for helping to get that information out as a new FAQ resource on community. And, everyone on the team has been really hard at work trying to share information about the bill. And that's just been a huge help. And I hope you guys feel that that's been a huge help to you. And just again, we're expecting that analysis, the formal modeling on the bill to emerge soon. So there's going to be more information coming your way about the specifics as soon as they are available. We will make sure that you have everything you need, and we'll keep answering all of your questions as this bill progresses and as the next steps move forward. We don't expect much more to happen on this until after the election. So more to say on permitting, but let's talk a little bit about electrification now, because this is Electrification Month. And so we just wanted to give a shout out in the national highlights section to all the electrification work that's already been going on in the field this year. We know the youth are involved in the Great School Electrification Challenge, and they've been hard at work lobbying their school boards. And we know many states and chapters have electrification teams focused on this part of our work. And some chapters have even had electrification fairs. And of course, we've also been talking a lot about people electrifying their own homes. So coming up on this Thursday, we have an Ask Me Anything with CCL homeowners who have electrified. And I know that the registration link is going to get dropped in the chat so that you can register for that. I'm going to say I'm personally very interested in this. Our home is mostly electrified, but we do have this propane tank that we inherited when we moved in, and I want to figure out how to get rid of it. So I'm hoping somebody has an answer for my question on that call. So I hope to see you all there. But it's been really great to see all the enthusiasm around this part of our work. And we're really excited now that the whole organization is focused there too for Electrification Month. Okay, so that's a bit of what we're sharing and celebrating at the national level. And now I'm going to hand it over to Flannery for a few minutes here to share some of the local successes and things that you all are excited about on the chapter level. So Flannery, tell us what you have seen.
Yes, okay. There's a lot in the Q&A. In the interest of time, I'm just going to whip through a list real quick. Tons of chapters have been doing election postcards with Environmental Voter Project to get environmental voters out to the polls. So I'm just going to rattle them off. 500 postcards and counting from the Chicago chapter, 600 postcards from Iowa City, 250 postcards to Montana voters, 200 from North Carolina Central and Cape Fear region chapter, 2,500 postcards in the mail for Alaska's open primary, 750 from the West LA chapter. So folks are hustling out there. I also saw some notes about LTE parties, some more of the co-sponsors that you mentioned on those secondary bills. People are saying that was their representative. So lots of good stuff going out there, but it seems like there's lots of appetite and enthusiasm for mobilizing environmental voters.
All right, that's a lot, you guys. Like that's a lot. So thank you all for everything that you're doing out there in the field, and congratulations on all of those wins. It's really amazing work. So everybody gets to celebrate all of that work right now. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to our guest speaker. So we have Aimee Witteman from Rewiring America who's joining us today. Aimee is the Vice President of Investment at Rewiring America, where she attracts funding from the philanthropy sector and corporate partnerships to scale strategies that help families and communities electrify. She's also the former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intergovernmental Affairs at the U.S. Department of Energy and has worked extensively in regional and national climate philanthropy. So, welcome, Aimee. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Rachel, Brett, Flannery, staff at CCL, and organizers. I am so impressed by the number of people on this call today on a Saturday in the middle of summer. So awesome to be with you. I have some slides I'm going to share. I'm so excited that CCL and Work Money and others have made August the month of electrification. And I have this presentation where I will talk about Rewiring America's work and why we're focused on electrification and some of our tools, which I know you've been using in outreach. And then happy to stick around for discussion as much as time as there is. And I will right now also drop my email in the chat so that if there's anything I'm not able to answer on the call today, feel free to follow up with me directly. But I will just say again, just to sort of reiterate while I was trying to get my slides up, that the work that CCL is so important, that you are on the ground in these communities. As somebody who's worked on climate and clean energy and policy advocacy and movement building for decades, the kind of work that you all do at such a local level makes such an incredible difference. And it's very connected to our theory of the case at Rewiring America. I've worked for so long passing big policy at the state level, the Inflation Reduction Act at the federal level, the largest investment in clean energy in U.S. history. And it really all comes back down to the local community, and the connections that we make with neighbors. And my mother-in-law, who is based in St. Cloud, Minnesota, is a member of her CCL chapter there. And it's how she stays connected to these issues and is able to bring her personal passion and connection with neighbors to this. And so I just want to give you such major props for the incredible work you do, and so excited for our partnership. So I've got this short presentation. We'll go through this. Rewiring America started just a few years ago in 2020, and we came on the scene with a little bit of a different analysis around the climate crisis, which is, for so long, as we all know, who've worked in this space for a while, there's been a huge focus on energy efficiency, and that's been needed, conservation, supply side, changing our sources of power, building transmission, like Rachel was just talking about. We have to deploy so much clean energy technology. Rewiring, through our founder, Saul Griffith, and his analysis of the U.S. energy system through a big grant from ARPA-E in 2018, studied the energy flows in the U.S. and concluded that 42% of energy-related emissions in the United States come from 5 key decisions that we make around our kitchen tables around how we heat and cool our home, how we dry our clothes, how we cook our food, how we heat and cool our water, and how we get ourselves around. So, what does this mean? This means that we have the power ourselves to make a difference on the climate crisis, but we have to do this at scale. And so we got to make decisions at our household level. We need to work in communities, and we have to work as a movement across the country to essentially have 129 million households make key decisions about those five machines in their homes over the next couple of decades. And so this is why the work that you all are doing in your communities talking about electrification is so important. Perfect. Thank you, Brett. So again, this is just sort of laying out for anyone who's sort of like new to the electrification space. This is like a big aha that we do have to do all this work on the power sector side, the supply side, to change where electrons come from. We got to build infrastructure to connect that wind and solar and geothermal to load centers. And we have to change our machines away, swapping out fossil fuel machines, like Rachel was saying, her propane tank with electric machines. So this is how you heat your home, your furnace, how you heat your water heater, what kind of car you drive, if you have, charging infrastructure in your home or your apartment or your community, how you cook your food, switching from gas to electric or induction, and then where your electricity comes from. So, getting those solar panels on folks' rooftops, getting community solar. This is where Rewiring America focuses our attention. And the benefit is there's a huge emission impact from this. The challenge is that we have to do this across 129 million households. So we have, I'll talk about this a little bit more, but we have a very multidisciplinary team, and part of our team is a very robust research and analysis team. So they produced something a couple years ago called the Pace of Progress. So it's like, okay, we know we have to switch out these machines. How quickly do we have to do it in a way that matters for climate math? And so our pace of progress is what we sort of hold ourselves accountable to. So we have to swap out all of the machines in 129 million households, 1 billion machines by 2050 to be on that 1.5, 2 degree path. And so this is we call it the pace of progress, and this is what we are hold ourselves accountable to and check and benchmark ourselves against on an annual basis. So this is our, one of the things I love about CCL is that you all are so good at communication. And this is also something I love about Rewiring America is how do we talk about this in a way that lands with people? And I think one of the sort of frames that we're really working with is to give people the power, to remind them they actually do have power and agency to make decisions in their own lives that can make a difference on climate, and to spread the word to their neighbors. I think for a long time we've pivoted away from that, where it's like, right, okay, it's not your straw and your soda can, it's not recycling, it's these big decisions made by big companies. And it's like, yes, that is true, and you actually can make some decisions as a consumer that will make a big difference as far as the climate is concerned. So giving the sense of power and agency back to folks. So the power is yours, but as we all know, this is a hard message to break through to folks, because especially as we're seeing the impact of climate change on our daily lives on a more regular basis, there's a real sense of overwhelm. Where do I start? How can anything I do make a difference on this global problem? And so many times we see people just being, paralyzed. They're like, I can't do anything, so I'm just going to leave things the way they are. My life is good. It's good enough the way that it is. And so this is one of the things that we have to break through, is to address this sort of fractured sense of status quo being good enough for people. So when you look at this big problem, we've got 42% of energy-related emissions. We've got to electrify 129 million households. How do we do this? For anyone who has tried to electrify their own home, sounds like Rachel, his house is mostly electrified. We are electrifying our 104-year-old house in Tacoma Park, Maryland. This is not easy. And the challenges are in a few different places, and we have really focused our analysis on these three core challenges that we have to address to electrify everything for everyone. The first is increasing awareness, just letting folks know that these other machines are an option for them. Not only are they better for climate, they're just better all around machines. They're faster, they're cleaner, they're more efficient. We also have to reduce the costs. A lot of these machines in a lot of places are still out of reach for many people. And or many people are like, the last thing on my list when I'm paying for medical bills and childcare is my furnace. So how do we raise awareness, reduce the upfront and operating costs, and then third, make this easy, reduce the friction. And I will use myself as an example. Like, how do we find a contractor who even knows what electrification means or the heat pump as opposed to the gas furnace? So how do we make it easy for people to do this in their lives once they know that this is an option for them and they can make the finances pencil? So this is just unpacking these three challenges in a little bit more detail. So this is how we think about the increasing awareness vis-a-vis that pace of progress. So we have to move folks from not aware to committed to action to electrified everything, a billion machines, 129 million households by 2050. So, this is where our work with CCL and Work Money and League of Conservation Voters and all these partners that are on the ground in communities, United Way, who we are partnering with on the Power Forward communities, just to let folks know this is an option for you and it will save you money. And we'll get into that. That's the next slide. So first is just raising awareness. Second is addressing this cost waterfall. This is a very wonky slide. Let me just unpack this for you a little bit. So, and this is where the IRA really rubber meets the road. So we have to reduce the cost of, let's say, a heat pump and reduce the operating costs. So what we are doing at Rewiring America is really looking at how we can braid and stack different incentives, rebates, tax credits, and financing mechanisms to bring down the cost. So we've been working in 6 communities doing demonstration projects the last year, one of which is Pittsburgh. And so this is, an example in Pittsburgh. But essentially what you're seeing here is the purple bar is the cost of installing a heat pump. And then the different forms of financing that we are trying to take advantage of. The rebates that are in the Inflation Reduction Act. This was one of the big things that Rewiring America focused on in 2021 and 2022, getting billions of dollars for home electrification. And now we're seeing states roll out those rebates. Wisconsin, I think, was the most recent one, week before last. Working with utilities. In the case of Pittsburgh, this is Duquesne Lights to take advantage of utility rebates. And then one of the things that we're working on, and this is again where the work that you all are doing at the community level matters so much, is doing negotiated discounts with heat pump manufacturers, the OEMs. If we can aggregate demand at the community level and say, we've got 10,000 people in Pittsburgh who want heat pumps, we can actually get a discount, an upfront discount on the cost of those machines, working with those companies. We're experimenting with something called the Conductor Fund, which is working with corporations like Google and Microsoft to donate. And it's an alternative to carbon offsets buy heat pumps in the community where you've got a data center. And so these are ways that we're bringing down the upfront costs of heat pumps. This is obviously an ongoing part of our work. One last thing I will just say about this slide is that we also have a policy team who's working at the state PUCs in many places to work on rate reform so that we're also making electricity more competitive with electricity from natural gas, because in many places it's just like Minnesota, where I am now, or Wisconsin, it's just not cost competitive. So the cost is a major focus of ours. And then the third slide, Brett, in this series is the tools. And so this might be what you're most familiar with Rewiring America, which is we have a huge software and engineering team. And so Inflation Reduction Act passed, the president signed it into law. The next day, we put our IRA calculator on our website, which has been used over 1 million times by people who have come to see, what do I qualify for? Here's my income, here's my zip code. What kind of tax credits or rebates do I qualify for? And how much money will that save me on which machines? This is the third piece of that puzzle of making it easy, making it simple, reducing friction for people. Once they know electrification is even a thing or a heat pump is a thing, where do they go? And so we are focusing a lot of our time and energy and resources on this. Since we released the calculator, we released the personal electrification planner. So this actually walks you through, I want to electrify my house. Where do I start? Do I start with my panel? Do I start with my stove? And walks people through that. We will be adding more tools to this over the coming year where we will actually connect them with contractors who install this stuff. And then our website, which is going through an overhaul and will be updated by this fall with more resources for folks. So I know that this is a lot of partners, CCL, LCV. What's been most helpful to you all is pointing folks that you're talking to these resources, and this will continue to get built out over the next year. Okay, so this is for the folks that are interested in things like theories of change. So this is how this all fits together, right? Sort of like CCL, we have a web of activities from the software to policy work to research and analysis, but it really comes down to what we call you, us, everyone. We start with you. How do we build a platform and increase awareness so that if you hear heat pump from your neighbor, you Google it and you can figure out what that means, how your life would be benefited by it, how you can access financial resources to be able to afford it, how you can find a contractor to install it. And then we're aggregating demand. We're working at the community level, again, to be able to bring down the cost of these machines. And aggregating demand is something that we're doing in partnership with the Clinton Global Health Initiative. It's something that they've used in other countries around bringing down the costs of pharmaceuticals. So we're doing that with these electric machines. And then the third piece is, how do we make this affordable for everyone? So this is the policy work we're doing at the state level, at the public utilities commissions. Should there be another opportunity to move another package of federal policy, we have to be doing all of these things simultaneously to transform the market. This is the team. It's an interdisciplinary team, as I mentioned, and we are growing really fast. And we are, it's a great place to work, a great group of folks coming from different disciplines. And we recognize that we will only be so successful without the amazing partnerships of folks like CCL. But this is the team, and it's growing. I think I just have a few more slides left. And this is just a little bit of a recap of where we've been as an organization and where we're going. So we started in 2020. We worked on getting the rebates and tax credits into the Inflation Reduction Act for electrification. We also worked on the Defense Production Act for domestic manufacturing of machines like heat pumps. We launched Pace of Progress. The next big thing that I haven't mentioned is that we pulled together a coalition called Power Forward Communities with United Way, LISC, Enterprise Community Partners, and Habitat for Humanity, legacy organizations with deep connections at the community level, long history in single and multifamily housing. And we applied for the Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Fund, one of the big programs that's in the Inflation Reduction Act. And we were notified by the EPA in April that we are awarded one of the GGRF grants. So the last part of that cost waterfall are low interest loans for families to be able to access that, again, to bring down the cost of electric machines. And we are launching that program later this fall. So more to come on that. But I will say, just a quick update on all of this is, as some of you might have seen, you pass a policy like the Inflation Reduction Act, years in the making, years to accomplish. And last week, the Treasury released their first numbers. 3.4 million families have benefited from the first year of tax credits, saving families $8 billion 300,000 of those tax credits went to heat pumps. So it's starting to work, right? This virtuous cycle of policy and market change and consumer behavior change is starting to happen, but we have to accelerate that cycle through our work on the ground at the community level. So this is just a recap again, Inflation Reduction Act. Questions in the chat earlier about working with chambers of commerce. So we work at the community level, policy. We have a CEO coalition of businesses. We have a coalition of local elected leaders working with local chambers of commerce. And my experience, as somebody had noted from Montana, is so important. So finding these stakeholders who have a self-interest in this electric future and working with them to either pass more policy or increase uptake of these existing programs like the ones in the IRA. And there may be one or two more slides. I will just say, one of the things I love most about Rewiring, and perhaps you do too, is just like we try to inject joy and fun into what can otherwise be a pretty either bland, arcane, or depressing topic. And so we send Mr. Heat Pump like here to different ribbon cuttings. And so we're doing events in August for the second anniversary of the IRA. And this is another part of what we bring and another way that we can partner together with CCL in different places, but really bringing some lightness and joy and fun into the conversation, which, as we have seen in the last couple of weeks, is incredibly energizing for many people. Yeah, and so this is like the final thing I will just say is that we are, as an organization, continuing on, all of these fronts, and with this Power Forward coalition that I mentioned, and being a recipient of one of the GGRF awards, are really going to be working more deeply than ever at the local level over the next 7 years, with the benefit of this award from the EPA bringing financing to households to be able to afford electric machines, whether single family or multifamily. And so more to come on this as we stay in touch and work together over the next year. But this was a very exciting development for us. And this is just a sampling of the communities around the country who pledged support and to work with Rewiring America and the Power Forward Communities coalition as we launch this all over the country in the next couple of years. This all comes back down to you and the household level. And this is Andrea from Georgia. I mentioned these 6 demonstration projects where we have been testing this household electrification effort, and lots of learnings from that. That could be a whole other presentation. What have we learned? And it sounds like you have an upcoming call on this of like, what does it take to electrify people's homes? But we have lessons from these places, including DeSoto, Georgia, where this photo was taken on a project that has been led by leader Stacey Abrams with us. But what we're finding is that people love these machines. Folks, furnace goes out, their stove breaks, and when it breaks, we want to be there so that they know the electric machine is the best option for them and their families. Not only is it good for the climate, most importantly, it will save you money over time. It will reduce emissions in your house, like a gas stove that we know is like so terrible for people with asthma or other pre-existing conditions. So at the end of the day, it comes back to improving people's lives. And I'll stop here with this picture of Andrea in Georgia, and we can stop sharing the slides and just take questions or whatever comes next. Brett, Rachel, Flannery.
Awesome. Thank you, Aimee. We do have a bunch of questions and not enough time to get to them all, unfortunately. So I'll just ask you two. One, I see a theme emerging where a few people are asking about what resources exist for renters. If folks don't own a home, how can they sort of support this transition?
Yeah, so let me find the link to it. So the personal electrification planner that I mentioned, we have it for households and we have it for renters. And we actually, I just noticed today on social media, a renter saying that she used our resource and she's organizing other renters in her complex with the landlord. And so we do have tool link to our website, but we have a whole set of tools for renters for sure, not just homeowners. Of course, you're like dealing with other particular dimensions, but we want to make sure that this is available for everybody.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And then I saw a couple questions, and this will be our last question. I saw a few on the theme of thinking about the power grid itself, and if
Yeah,
if a community is served by a coal plant or other fossil
yeah.
fuels, then how does electrification ultimately help us get to our climate goals, reduce our carbon pollution when the grid itself is not totally powered by clean energy yet?
Right, totally. So, yes, I love this question, having worked mostly on the power sector before I joined Rewiring America. So, absolutely, we basically have to be doing both at once simultaneously. We can't wait to clean up the supply to work on the demand. And first of all, these electric machines are much more efficient than regular machines that we have in our homes, like a gas furnace. So you are already using, like, regardless of the source of electricity or energy, less energy buying electric machines than you are fossil fuel machines. However, we have to keep working on greening the grid. So we partner with organizations for whom getting solar and wind, and importantly, transmission built, because we know there are bottlenecks in getting that clean power to load centers. Like, all of that has to be happening simultaneously. But we know our lane, and our lane is really getting these electric machines in homes and then partnering with folks that are continuing to green the grid. That absolutely has to continue. I will say that I think that there is an opportunity for us at Rewiring to be able to just bring our voice and manufacturers that we work with to the table to talk about, the importance of solar and wind and battery storage, and pairing rooftop solar, especially with electric machines, really reduces the cost further for folks. So all of these things have to happen, absolutely, and we're really focused on the machine part of it and chunking that down for American households.
Got it. That makes sense. Well, one more benefit to the permitting reform legislation that Rachel was talking about
Yeah,
before. If we can build and connect more clean energy faster, then that gets us there too. Well, thank you so
yeah.
much, Aimee. I'm going to pass it back to Rachel now to continue with the call. But we appreciate you being
Thank
with
you.
us this month. Awesome. All right, Rachel, back to you.
Thanks, Flannery, and thanks again, Aimee, for joining us and for all that great information. And you guys, hopefully, you're following along in the chat. There are more resources there, and there will be more information coming to you after the call. Okay, so let's shift over now to our monthly action sheet. So we have a few things to go over for August on our electrification month. Um, August actions. Um, so I'm going to actually, in the interest of time, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit on this and let Elizabeth Dell jump in. She's going to walk us through some of the materials that we have available that will help you guys all do your home electrification conversations over the month. So very quickly, I'm going to jump to Elizabeth.
All right, thanks, Rachel. Our terrific marketing team has done it again. Here's what we have for you for Electrification Month. A table sign with the work money phone number on it. We also have a full page handout highlighting a few examples of the available electrification rebates and tax credits, along with the work money number. You also have the option of a quarter page handout with a QR code that links to our Electrification Month campaign page. There are a couple of slides for folks who give presentations to add to their slide decks. And finally, we've created a 2D electrification dollhouse that you can easily make at home. This display highlights the many opportunities people have to more affordably electrify their homes. There are labels indicating the savings people may qualify for on things like electrical panel upgrades, heat pumps, and basic weatherization. And just a quick shout out to Elizabeth Strum, CCL volunteer from New York, who came up with the original dollhouse idea.
longer. Thank you, Elizabeth. Now, our second action is talking to a friend about your home electrification plan experience, because there's nothing like hearing from real people on these issues to demystify them. And speaking of real people who are well versed in these issues, I want to give a shout out to our electrification action team, and our superstar volunteer, Pete Marsh, is here to tell you a little bit more about the team. So go for it, Pete.
Good afternoon and good morning, everybody from around the country. Pete Marsh here, one of the 4 co-leads of our electrification action team, and we're growing. The action team is super excited about this. Our focus is really to help enable and empower chapters to engage local electeds, community groups, and businesses about electrification as this powerful decarbonization solution that Aimee described that's within the decision-making control of households and small businesses. We're collaborating with staff, trying to serve as an extension of their work. Throughout July, we held webinars every Monday, so 4 webinars, to talk about all the resources and outreach tools. You've seen a little bit of them just now from Elizabeth. We went deeper diving into those and some other best practices from chapters around the country. We'll drop a link into the chat, or just go to the Electrification Action Team homepage, and it's all linked from there in CCL community. But everything from those brochures that you saw to the all-electric dollhouses, I've seen at least a dozen around the country with different chapters, spinny trivia wheels. Those 3D artifacts are fantastic for attracting kids to our tables at events and engaging the kids while we have pleasant conversation with their parents. So very sneaky and very helpful. Anyway, thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you very much, Pete. Okay, on to our next action, which is continuing to engage candidates during the August recess. Our members of Congress are back in their districts in the states this month, and many of them are campaigning. They're holding events. It's the perfect time to get out and attend those events and ask climate questions. So we have more guidance on that in the August action sheet. And then our next action related to that is helping people make a plan to vote. So you can get involved in the Environmental Voter Project phone banks, which we hold weekly. And you can also start reaching out in your personal network and ask 5 friends if they're registered to vote and if they have a plan to vote. And then our final action here is to remind you that next month is our annual inclusion conference. This year's event is called Rising Above, Renewal and Resilience for Our Future. It'll take place online. It's September 20th and 21st. Registration is now open, so please plan to join us for our event. And if you haven't been to any of these, they are so wonderfully done and so critically important, both to our work as CCL, but also to our work as just members of our communities. Okay, so that was a quick run through of all of our actions, and that is everything that we wanted to present for you today. As a quick reminder, please do log your attendance and let us know that you were here today for the August meeting. There's a link on screen, and there will be a link on screen and a QR code for you to scan. And I want to thank you all for being here for this month's meeting. We'll say goodbye now, a little CCL TV style, and we'll see you next month on September 14th. And in that meeting, we'll have a Q&A with behavioral scientist and author Dan Ariely. So we'll see you in September. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.